This week we're going to look at H for head collars. So that is any kind of control device that goes over your dog's face. So that's things like halties, dogmatics, gentle leaders, figure 8 leads, anything that goes over your dog's nose to give you more control. I'll preface this by saying that I don't overly recommend the use of head collars. It's not something that I use in my training, but I do work with a lot of clients who already use these devices when they come to me, or they feel that they need them for extra control if they feel that they can't adequately control their dog. So if you do find that you want to use a device like this, or you already use it, here's a few things to think about in relation to how you use it and why. Head collars have become hugely popular in recent years because they're marketed as a humane way to stop your dog from pulling. So this is your timely reminder that nothing that works aversively can be humane, truly. If it works by causing discomfort or pain to your dog, it's not that humane, but humane is a spectrum. And also, anyone selling you something is going to try and make it sound good. There's no one out there marketing head collars with names like the Face Shredder 3000 or the Get Your Dog to Behave or Else. They have names like Gentle Leader and Canny Collar and nice sounding things. But with that said, the act of just putting a head collar on your dog is not automatically aversive, and it doesn't make you a bad person if you feel that you need to use something like this on your dog. So the first thing that you've always got to look at with this sort of device is specifically how does it work? Where is it applying pressure to the dog and why is it effective? And not all designs are the same. Depending on how your head collar is designed, it's going to apply pressure to different points of the face and neck, and it's going to be applied in different ways when you put pressure on the lead. And the main reason that I don't tend to use head collars is that they work by applying pressure to a very sensitive bit of the dog's anatomy. When you look at what's actually underneath your dog's skin on their face, you're putting a huge amount of pressure on very delicate facial nerves. The reason head collars work so effectively is that you're putting pressure on bits that are not comfortable. So for that reason, material and fit are absolutely crucial. You don't just grab any device that you can get your hands on and throw it on your dog and hope for the best. Styles that I would never ever recommend is anything made of rope, because you're then going to add abrasive injuries if your dog fights against it, and anything that can tighten all over. So I will never use figure of 8 leads or collars, because if you apply pressure, it creates uneven pressure points all over the face, and then you can get all sorts of injuries happening. Also, anything that can tighten and keep tightening, so anything that doesn't have some kind of mechanical stop. If your dog keeps fighting against it, or if the worst should happen and you accidentally let them go and it gets caught on something, you don't want it to be able to keep tightening until it cuts into your dog. But let's say you found a type of head collar that you're comfortable with that can only tighten a little bit. Next thing to consider is how to desensitize your dog to it in the first place. Because the most common thing that I hear is people saying, oh, he hates it, but it's really effective. You know, it's the only way I can walk him, but he rubs his face on the ground and he tries to get it off. Is it really being effective at that point? All you're doing is causing a huge amount of distress to your dog. So if I was to introduce a device like this, I would take several days just to get the dog used to it before ever attaching a lead to it. And it's similar steps to what I would use for muzzle training. You know, get your dog used to the sight of it, get them used to bringing their head close to it, putting their nose through it with no pressure on, putting their nose through it and having it held there for a second, fastening the clips but not putting any pressure through the head collar, and then even taking the dog for a walk with the head collar on without attaching the lead to it, so that he's feeling what it's like, he's getting used to wearing it with no pressure through it. Because the whole theory behind these devices is that they should only be uncomfortable if they're engaged. If you just throw them on and hope for the best, they're not comfortable. So the next thing you've got to ask yourself is, where is the leash pressure being applied when I actually pull on the lead? And by that I mean, when you pull the lead, is the pressure all going directly through the dog's face, or is it being distributed through the body as well? And it's an unfortunate truth that I very rarely see people using head collars in a way that is actually fair to the dog. Most of the time people have one point of contact directly onto the head collar and nothing else. Now what this means is that yes, pressure goes through the head collar when the dog does something like pulling or lunging, but there's also pressure through the head collar if they change direction, stop and sniff, speed up, slow down. Sometimes even just the motion of the lead dangling from the head collar constantly is applying pressure. Whereas if we have 2 points of contact, one on the head collar and one on a harness, you're distributing that pressure much more evenly and you're only engaging the head collar when you really need it. So the only way that I would recommend actually utilising something like this is with a double-ended lead or 2 leads. That means that for the majority of your walk, while the dog's behaving normally, the pressure is through the back of the harness or through the collar if you walk your dog on a collar. And you're only engaging the head collar when you need it. This also means that it's easier to transition back to using the collar or the harness again, because your dog is not feeling constant pressure from the lead. What you're likely to find, if you just throw the lead on the head collar and go, your dog's less comfortable, and if you stop using the head collar, they go straight back to pulling again. And it's because you've not actually taught them anything at that point. You've not used the device as a training aid, you've just used it to suppress the behaviour that you didn't like. And as with all of my training, I really don't approve of behaviour suppression. It's not addressing the root cause of why your dog is pulling in the first place, and there are so many reasons why a dog might pull on the lead. They might be confused and not understand what the leash pressure is supposed to mean. They might be overexcited, they might be nervous. And there have actually been a couple of dogs that I've worked with that pulled on the lead as an early warning sign of hip dysplasia. Their hips were uncomfortable and they learned that leaning on the collar or the harness and leaning into that pressure lifted the weight off of their back end a little bit and relieved some of the pain. If you just got mad at them for pulling at that point, you wouldn't really be addressing why they were pulling in the first place. You're also not actively teaching your dog what you do want them to do. You're not teaching them what pressure through the harness or collar means. You're just making it more unpleasant for them to pull by putting something on their face. So you're not really gaining anything long term by relying solely on something like a head collar. You're just putting a lid on a behaviour that you don't like right now and not addressing what you want to happen next. Another advantage of having 2 points of contact, one on a harness and one on a head collar, is that it makes it very difficult to apply too much pressure to the head collar. Because it is something that I see quite often, somebody's walking their dog with the lead directly attached to the head collar, no other points of contact, and maybe the dog is overexcited or reactive, is lunging towards other dogs, pulling towards them, and the owner ends up lifting the dog right off the ground using the head collar. The amount of pressure going through your dog's face at that point is huge, and it's not really an acceptable way to handle a dog. And I do see dogs coming to me with nerve damage from head collars. I see dogs with scars from head collars. So it's not a cure-all for behaviour problems. It's a tool that gives the human slightly more power when the dog pulls against them. And an important safety point, you should never attach a long line or a flexi lead directly to a head collar. For one thing, it's sending your dog ridiculous mixed messages that the flexi lead is encouraging them to pull when they feel pressure because they need to get more line. But you've also slapped a head collar on them that causes pain or discomfort when they pull. So using both of them at once is simultaneously telling your dog you need to pull to get to where you want to go, but also pulling is going to cause you pain and discomfort. So the other problem is that on a long line or a flexi lead, your dog can get up quite a lot of momentum by the time they reach the end of that line, and then they're suddenly stopped by the pressure of the lead. So if that pressure is going through something like a head collar, it's going to be extremely painful for your dog and it can potentially cause serious injuries. That point's true of anything other than a harness, really. I never attach a long line to a collar. I would never attach it to a control device like a choke chain, not that I use those anyway. But the same is true of flexi leads. If you're attaching a flexi lead directly to a collar and the dog reaches the end of it rapidly, they're going to do more damage to their neck than they would in a short lead. So you should never attach flexi leads or long lines to anything other than a harness, but you absolutely should not be attaching it to a head collar. But there are alternatives to using devices like this. So my first choice is always going to be a harness, and something that frees up the dog's shoulders and can be worn comfortably. If your dog actively dislikes harnesses of various different styles, then that's different. You might opt for a flat collar at that point. But for the most part, I like a harness because it's very hard to do the dog any damage while it's wearing one. If you feel like you don't have enough control over your dog with a harness, I might pair the harness with something like a flat collar or a martingale collar. Or I might use a system like Grisha Stewart's leash belay, which is a really good waist belt system that takes the power out of your dog's pull and makes it much easier to control a dog that you feel is otherwise too strong for you. So that's been some of the ins and outs of head collar use. Like I say, they're not inherently barbaric tools, but there are significantly more reliable and comfortable ways to get your dog to walk nicely on a lead. If you've been considering using a head collar, or if you already use one and don't know how to transition off of it, get in touch. We'll have a talk about why your dog might be pulling in the first place, and then look at other methods of how we can encourage them to walk nicely without the need for tools.